This is Unexpected with Hannah Love. In this podcast, you will gain a new perspective of how God loves you enough to call you to things that you couldn't have imagined for yourself. Hello, everyone. If you are tuning in to today's episode, it is a part 2 from a conversation with my own sweet husband, Shay Mooney. Now, if you haven't listened to part 1, you may want to go back for a listen before continuing on, because we do give a lot of context before diving into the second half of our story. Within this episode, and really within our story, we cover everything ranging from the early years of marriage to babies and careers, and finding what joy really means in all of it. We laugh and we cry as we reminisce on the years of lessons and the seasons of growth that God has taken us through up to this point. I hope that you'll enjoy listening as much as we enjoyed sharing. Here is part 2.
Every single moment that I look back in these kind of checkpoints of my life of being like, oh yeah, that was a life changer. Oh yeah, that was a life changer. Oh yeah, that changed everything. Every one of those moments were so blatantly unobvious, and it was so blatantly God doing this, and it was the most unexpected moments. I mean, walking into a house party, meeting Dan. I mean, honestly, getting to Pittsburgh was an insane. The only reason I'm going to tell this backstory is because this is perfectly aligns with unexpected. The only reason that we went to that ministry school, let me take you through the sequence of events that happened. So I was about 17, and I had won that singing competition, and we were going to visit schools. And so I went up to some youth conference to go check out this school, and Gabby came with me. And at the time, Gabby and I were not very close, and she was doing a rock band. She was kind of doing her own thing. Wasn't really paying attention whatsoever to God. Was kind of running from any kind of calling. So we get up to this ministry, and during worship, we were sitting there, and Gabby, I think she was feeling, this is her words, not mine, she was feeling really convicted. So she walked out to the hallway. It was like, I'm going to get out of here. And she walked around the corner, and the first person she saw was like, hey, what's up? And just said hi. And it was this guy named Billy Chester. I don't know how I remembered his name. I haven't seen him in 10 years, but he walked up to Gabby and was like, hey, gave her a pamphlet and you should check this out. And out of nowhere, Gabby just radically gets called to this place and was wakes up one morning and was like, God told me to go to this ministry school. And it was just what are you talking about? You are going to ministry school. This is insane. And so we got back, from this trip, and that happened the next morning. She was like, I'm going to this ministry school. And I literally, for whatever reason, very confidently was just yeah, I'll go too.
I'm going with you.
I'm going to go with you. And so just the fact that she walked out there, she saw that and got the pamphlet. So long story short, we end up going to Pittsburgh together. And that is where I met, Gabby actually met a backup dancer for T-Pain. And that's how that whole thing kind of started to spin its web, and kind of making my journey to Nashville was literally off of one of those moments of Gabby just being like, I'm going to go to ministry school.
Yeah,
and I was
it wasn't
sure.
a little thing.
No, it wasn't a little moment.
Maybe I'll have her on one of these days, because I love to hear her tell the story, because there's so much in it. And I think that all of us in our own way, I say all of us, the Mooney siblings, I call myself one now. I've grafted in.
You've been grafted.
But I think all of us at some point or other have run from a calling that God has obviously put on us, even if we aren't aware of it. So anyway.
Yes. Going back to your point, I think that I'm just a big advocate and believer in prayer and, generational wisdom that is passed down, and just these roots that are kind of dug into the ground. I mean, so deeply, in both of our families. It's not just my parents or your parents, it's our grandparents and it's their parents. It's so deeply rooted in my family. And I just think that, I'm such a big proponent of that, of having, obviously, things happen unexpectedly, but I also think that, you have to put yourself in those positions in order for God to do something crazy.
Well, it's that position of obedience.
Yes. But also being just around. I think about people that, want to make it in the music industry. It's you can't even begin to think about that unless you're here and you are present. You have to be present to win. And I just think that, showing up sometimes, that's whenever God can do some of the most unexpected things, just being there and being present. You have to be there. And that's I guess, advice that I would give to young people moving to Nashville. we'll just take that piece and move it over there to an hour ago when we were talking about advice for young
Yeah.
people. But I think that you have to be present, in order for God to do some of these unexpected things. But it does amaze me, though, because I look back and, having Asher changed everything for us. It was a couple really hard years. We didn't get to have the honeymoon phase. There was none of that.
Yeah, you have to think, we dated long distance for a year.
Yeah.
Got pregnant. And then I, declare to you that I will not move without a commitment. Even though you'd already asked Dad's blessing and I had a baby in my belly, I was like, I'm not moving. And it was a whole thing. And I was very mad and upset. And again, that was a whole season of a lot for me personally. But we did. And I announced this last year, and we're about to have actually our next anniversary, our first anniversary, because the day that you proposed, we got married the same day.
Yeah.
But after we got married, I moved to Nashville. We bought our first house. I quit my job. I left my family and my friends. I was pregnant. I was 25 years old. You were on the road over 200 shows that year.
Yeah.
And then more of those days were gone traveling. And so that was a season of just trying to keep my head in severe depression.
Yeah.
For me, they talk about postpartum depression a lot, but there's prenatal depression. And so I had that and you were gone. And then the whole wrestling for you, I think.
I didn't want to be at that point. I got scared of
losing
my youth, I think.
Yeah. No. You went through, and you're a year younger than I am. So I was 25, you were 24, and your career is starting to really pick up.
Yeah.
And then here you are with a wife and about to be a newborn at home. And you felt trapped, right?
Yeah. Thinking about how young I was, first of all, I can't believe how old I am now. It's devastating. But thinking about being 24 and going through all this, I think that at 24 at that point, I thought that I kind of had it together. I thought I was mature. I was so wrong. I look back and I was so dumb. And I just think that at that point, I was starting to feel like I was trapped is the wrong word. I think I didn't necessarily feel trapped, but I felt like I was grasping on to what remained of my early 20s.
Right.
And not getting to go out with my friends. And,
I would consider it a really rebellious season.
Yeah.
Because it was like you resented the fact that you had a wife and you're about to have a baby, or you had a newborn baby, and that you were young, and that everyone else around you was single, and that your career is doing what it's doing. And when you came home, you wanted to go hang with your friends. And it was a lot, even for someone who is in a normal 9-to-5 career, but it is exponentially different for someone who is in a career where everything really, and I don't mean this in a bad way, is about you.
Yeah.
Right? And so it just magnified the unfairness of your situation.
Yeah. The poor me.
Yeah.
Situation, because it was like, if I didn't have a wife and kids, I'd be out there killing it,
right,
getting to play Golden Tee every night,
every night, and Tin Roof,
as I was doing,
which you were doing anyway.
Yeah. So that was a very rough season, I know, for you, but it was a rough season for both of us. We both kind of struggle with our own demons, but looking back on that now, though, it's like, imagine if that didn't all happen, and imagine if we didn't get to learn those lessons.
Yeah. But there is something in that season that I do want to point out, and you might squirm a little bit, so you can shut me down if you want to. But I do want to talk about the importance of the company that you keep.
Yeah.
And also, that's when I started praying every night, and I didn't know what I was asking for, but I prayed for wisdom and discernment.
Yeah.
And really, that's really when my relationship with God took off, was in that, the deepest
depression,
the
deepest valleys.
Because I felt like I had nothing else.
Yeah.
I felt like I didn't have a husband I could depend on. Sorry.
You talking about somebody else, right?
Yeah. My other husband.
Yeah.
So I felt like I could only count on God. And so I'm really thankful for that. And that's when I started asking and having like a real conversation, like a real relationship with God. And I kind of drug your parents into it a little bit, not your parents, but your mom. I was very honest with her about some of the things I was struggling with, and they prayed. I mean, they prayed over us. And
because there was a moment there that it was like,
there was a moment, and I'm going to say it in, I guess, the gentlest way I can, but it was probably the lowest point. And you really were far from me in my heart. And I felt like you were far from God.
yeah,
And I felt like you were choosing, like purposefully choosing a life that was different than what I knew we were supposed to have. And that hurt. And part of that we, kind of found later was in the company that you were keeping. Yeah. And I kind of...
Could have been people you were keeping around too. We don't know. We're not going into the specifics,
newborn,
but
it's the only person I knew at the time. So
he was a bad influence on you, I think.
And so I think I kind of, for the first time in my adult life, which I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so I'm a very quiet, like I never like to ruffle any feathers, but I finally kind of put my foot down and was like, hey, I can't control a lot. I can't control really anything outside of our house. Can't make decisions for you, but this is what I can do. And this is what I will do for us, for our baby. And like, I love you and I'm praying for you. But some of the people that you're around, they are not allowed in our house. They are not allowed around our kids. And there's really nothing else I can do outside of be a good wife and be a good mom and to lead our baby in Christ the best way I can while you're figuring it out.
Yeah. You laid the hammer down.
But
and at that point,
but a gentle hammer.
It wasn't as gentle as it was perfectly placed hammer. And I needed that kick in the pants to really kind of make some decisions for myself, of in those moments where we were both at our lowest. I mean, I just think that there was so many things I was struggling with of just being like, I don't know if I can do this or if I even like deserve to be a dad like this, Not that I ever thought of leaving Asher, out of my life or anything like that, but it was just
that's something else. Like divorce was never
it was never
in
the cards
either.
Yeah.
I mean, both of us were like, divorce is not an option, so something's going to give it.
Yeah, we're like, well, what do we do? We kill each other? What's going to happen? Something's going to happen. But those are the moments though that I look back and I'm so, in a weird way, I'm very thankful for them, which is a weird thing to say. It sucked. It was a horrible thing to have to go through. But some of the lowest times now, you watch God turn them into good things.
Good things.
Those are hard lessons to learn, and human beings make mistakes, and they're very stupid, and that's very evident throughout the Bible that, they're just always doing dumb things. I mean, David was, what an idiot, doing some horrible things, but he's a man after God's own heart. And why is that? It's because his humility and the way that his relationship with God, in his heart. And that's one thing I always, I think I got from my mom. No matter how far I ever got from God, it could never get to that lowest. I needed to kind of get toward the bottom to really realize that, okay, I've got to get it together. But I always had it in me where I was like, I know where I need to be. I mean, you kind of mentioned that earlier of when I was in Atlanta. I was like, I know I have to make it to Nashville. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I knew that you were the person that I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with. And I would think I was really struggling with that because me as a 7, I'm the adventurer. And I'm like, well, what if like this isn't? So what if I could be out there doing whatever I want to do? It was never like, what if she's not the right girl? What if there's another person out there for me? It was never that. It was just, I felt like I was losing my freedoms, which was so stupid because now, in our relationship, our life is incredible. We get to hang out with the 2 sweetest, most incredible little boys and my most amazing wife. And what God had waiting kind of in the wings for us was so much better than what I could have imagined doing as a single guy. Like, what would I do? I'll be golfing every day,
Every day.
And there's no fulfillment. What I've gotten from being a dad and being a husband
it's what you
is so
said
much
about
more fulfilling.
Finding your joy.
Yes, I'll circle back to that because that's kind of where I started. The most important lesson that I had to learn, and it was a hard one in moments, but knowing that I do not find my joy in what I do. I love what I do, but my true joy and my true happiness is with you 3 and being with you guys and being in a place with God that I find peace and knowing that that's where I get it from. And I had a very real, like, human moment. It was during COVID, and I'm probably going to cry when I say this, so I'm just going to say that out loud so I can prepare myself. But I remember I had this moment, and it was a game changer for me because we were kind of in this time, like before COVID, that our career was just exploding. I mean, we had just won like our 3rd Grammy, and we won every award that you could possibly win that year. That was when Tequila and Speechless, had come out. And we were on top of the world. We had just sold out an arena tour, and we got 3 shows in, did 2 shows in Nashville at Bridgestone, and it got canceled. And it was like, well, crap, what do we do now? And that was a very depressed state that I got in during that moment, because it was like, will I ever get to do this ever again? And this is what I've kind of found as my identity, is being a singer, being in the, had been my whole life up to that point. And I was just like, what am I going to do now? Like, is this ever going to come back? I didn't know if it was ever going to come back. And then you had this whole political climate that kind of, started after that of like, all right, vaccine, no vaccine, you're a murderer if you don't get it. This is all these things, these narratives that were being pushed was terrifying to me. And I don't like being told what to do. And so
Meanwhile, we have a newborn.
Meanwhile, we have another newborn that was born 2 weeks before those first shows and right before COVID. And it was just a very scary time, like, in the world. But in the midst of all of that, I think we were probably kind of getting on the other side of, like, the full-on lockdowns. It was like the first, maybe 3 weeks or so after everything shut down.
Probably 6 months.
Okay, well, I'm not good with time, so you might have to help me with that.
Yeah.
Whenever it was right in the midst of, we were at home, nothing was really open, and I sat down.
And on my side, guys, I was thriving because
she was killing it, absolutely loving it.
I was a 9. I was at home for the first time with my whole family. My husband was not gone. We had a newborn and our 3-year-old, and for the first time in my life, I felt like our family was all together and was able to spend the time together, and that it was a gift for us.
Yeah.
And my husband was just the most depressed that he had ever been. And it was, that was really hard for me. It was hard for me to see you like that. And selfishly, it was hard because I was like, are we not enough?
Yeah.
Like, this should be enough for you.
Yeah. I hated, knowing that you felt that way was tough, because it's you have to think, like, that's all I had known to that point. A massive chunk of who I identified as was then ripped right at the peak. It was like right on the mountaintop, and then someone just kicks you right off of the mountain. You're like, well, dang it. But all this being said, the reason what I had to learn was that was not who I was. And Asher at the time was probably, I guess, 3. And I had this very human moment where I was sitting on the couch and I was looking up at the mantle, and we had 2 of the Grammys were sitting up there on, like, either side of the TV. I don't know where they came from, but they were up there for some reason. And I just had this moment where Asher ran by and he said, "Don't get my tickles, Daddy." And I was just like, and it was a moment that I will never forget, because I looked up at that Grammy and I was so thankful that was not what I was chasing. And it was just it wrecked me. I mean, every time I think about it, I cry, because it was such a revelation to me of like, oh, got it. And it was just a very life-changing thing for me, because then I realized, like, I don't need all of this other stuff. I love it. I love doing it, and I was put on this earth to do that. But if it all went away tomorrow, I'd be okay. And that's about as much as I can get through right now. But yeah, that was a big lesson that I had to learn. And I think a lot of things started kind of coming together, and I think I started to kind of surrender a little bit after that. Yeah. Of just being like, okay.
I mean, a lot of things came together after that. I remember praying desperately, God, send men into Shay's life. Because I think, so, too, in this world, in this city, something that is kind of hard to find is like-minded people. And I know that sounds strange, because Nashville is such a community and there is such a presence of the church here.
Yeah, but there's such a pursuit
but there's also a pursuit of
things.
Of the things and of
social media,
fame
people,
and this
fame.
industry and success, in whatever category that is for you.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I didn't even pray this for me, which is shocking because I didn't have a group of women, but I remember struggling thinking, I can't really be a part of a church group here because nobody else understands what it's like to be the wife of a touring artist. And also like, I really, not to be ugly, but I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a social liability when we go to award shows because I'm just like, what do they sing again? And that is terrible.
You don't know who anyone is,
But
which is the funnest thing ever.
And it's not that I don't respect people and admire people, but I don't care what awards you win. And I don't care what your name is. And I don't care. I care about who people are, like what's in their heart, what they bring to the table as a human and as a child of God.
Yeah.
And that's kind of for me where I have found my tension of, okay, where do I find other like-minded people? But instead of praying for me for like-minded people, I was praying for you. And I was like, okay, God, send men into my husband's life that he respects. Send men who he can relate to, he can look up to, but they know that you are their priority. That Shay knows that you, God, are their priority, even in the midst of all their success here on earth.
Yeah, that was another very unexpected thing that happened. I was coming back. This was probably, 2 days after you had prayed this?
It was a week after. I've been praying really hard for a week.
Yeah. So I get back off the road, and I get back a little early, and I didn't tell you I was going to surprise you. And
I didn't tell you that I was going to go to the early service.
You didn't tell me you were going to the early service. So as I'm pulling in, same time you were leaving, and I was like, what the heck is she doing?
And I was like, we're going to the early service so we could see you when you get home. Get in.
And so I ran in and changed, and we were too late to make the early service in Nolensville where we were going to church.
Yeah.
And we ended up going to the other campus of our church. And that was a very crazy, unexpected thing that happened because we were like, we walk in the door and we're already not even supposed to be here, and we were supposed to be going to the early service.
Not a soul. Just totally empty.
There was nobody in the hallway, which is, now that I look back on it, thinking about how busy it is, that is a wild thing because there's always like 50 people in the concourse right there.
More than 50.
More than 50. And I walked in, and the first person that I see is Carrie Underwood. And I'm like, well, we know one person.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the most Nashville thing ever. You go to church and you see a superstar. And so we said hey, and I hugged her. And I had never met her husband, Mike. And it was literally probably 5 minutes after that, she invited us to come sit with her. And after church, I met Mike and got his number. And we
were in line to pick up the kids.
Yes, pick up the kids. And they invited us to lunch at their house the next week. And that was looking back on it, it was such an impactful moment because Mike became that mentor, that kind of rock for me. And it was like right after you'd prayed for it. And I had not met anyone that was like that in my life up to this point, in Nashville.
In that same week, I mean, I've got to write a book because God really hears and God really answers.
Yeah.
Like above and beyond what we ask.
The very next week, I met Chris Tomlin.
Yeah. You went out.
wrote some songs with him.
And you wrote with Chris Tomlin. And then you became a part of the Bible study group at church with some really incredible men. And I was just like, thank you, Jesus. But at the same time, God started sending women into my life. And I'm like, wow. It was really humbling for me because I never asked for me.
Yeah.
I asked for you. And God was like, no. You need people too.
Yeah.
You need community too.
And I know that there was a lot of people praying for that, including myself, of, all right, well, now Hannah needs what she prayed for me about, and it was such a game changer to have other guys that knew what it was like to be in this industry, but also like, Mike is now retired from, the NHL and he has way more time. He's not touring. And so it was a really fun thing for me to have someone who knew what it was like kind of to be married to someone who does what I do. But it was just so funny because Mike is the you of the relationship, and so you always usually marry someone opposite. And so Mike has just been he's like the you know, in my life. You know, he's probably a 9 as well. I don't know what he is, but he's very patient and calm and very steady. And I have to have a steady hand in my life because I am a absolute electric circuit of energy.
Or I actually call, I don't know that you know this, but I actually call you like the pinball.
100%.
Because, pinball machine, it's like ding, 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 ding.
I'm a pinball machine if there were not parameters.
Yes.
I'm a pinball in the open world.
Yes. And I have always said, we'll go into a room and I just lose you. And I'm just like fully panicked, becoming a wallflower while you're just being a bouncy ball around the room. But I love that about you. Right. You complete me, babe. Anyway, thank you for sharing all of that. And I wanted you to touch on it because I really wanted to double down on the importance of the people that you surround yourself with. Because in that really bad season, a few years before, you were around people who did not have the same core values. Yeah. You were around people who did not place God at the center of their lives, of their families' lives. They did not have, even if they said that they had that as their foundation, which there's a lot of deception out there in the world. And there are a lot of people who go around saying, I'm a Christian, but their actions meet what their mouth is saying. Yeah. It's just 100%. Lip service. Yeah. And you can tell them by their fruit. And so something that I would say if I was giving advice to people, to young people, to really anyone, is just that prayer for discernment. Because I prayed that prayer of discernment and God showed me. Yeah. And I've since prayed that almost every night for years. And I've asked for supernatural discernment of people's spirits. And I know that sounds like, ooh, that sounds like a lot. But what I mean by that is I want to know a person's heart. Yeah. And I think that God will show you that if you're asking for that discernment. Yeah. Because there are a lot of times people can choose to, because especially for you in that season, I think I can say this, you kept your eyes closed to it. I think you knew. Yeah. I think you knew the company you were keeping. At that point, I didn't really care. But they were telling you, oh yeah, I go to this church. Oh yeah, I do this with all these people in these circles. That sounds good, but I think that you knew that their character didn't align with that. And so you can't just ask God for discernment, but you have to be willing to open your eyes to it because sometimes that also means pruning people from your life. Yeah. And that can be uncomfortable and it can be sad. Yeah. Because some people, they might be a part of your life like they were old-time friends. Yeah. But you also have to understand that as we grow and as our relationship deepens with Christ, some people don't want to go there. Yeah. And some people aren't ready, and some people will never choose to go there. Yeah. It's not to say that we can't love them. For sure. It's okay to love those people, but the problem is in your life, you have to make sure that you are getting filled up more than you are giving out. Because if you're, when I would hang with Mike a lot and I'm going to these Bible studies, I just found myself, it was easier also to love those people and know that whatever it was in their life that was bringing negativity, I was able to give them something rather than me go there, be empty, and they pour all of their crap onto me, you know? And so it's important to love those people, but it's the most important, especially with what both of us do, it's important to be continually, filling yourself up with, the word and to make sure that before you try to go out and to pour into somebody else, that you yourself are getting filled up. You can't pour from an empty cup. Exactly. That would have been a better way to put it and a lot shorter. But I'm so blown away by what God has done, in our lives and through us and the things that we've gotten to do. And it's incredible. And I love, your podcast is so amazing because I feel like unexpected really, it sums up the moments of our lives, of all of our lives, not just you and I, but it's an incredible thing. And, you tell stories about it all the time on the podcast, but stories in the Bible, most every story that is great that we love in the Bible happened literally out of nowhere. Yeah. One day, David's chilling in a field, gets chosen, goes and kills Goliath. A teenage boy.
teenage boy.
Not even
And-
wearing armor, and goes and kills the giant.
Yes.
And Nehemiah is the cupbearer to the king.
Yeah. We don't have to tell the whole story. But
I know, but I'm just
we're going
saying,
into David now.
I'm just saying.
No, but it's unbelievable. Like the things that you don't know are happening. And God's like, yeah, this is going to happen, but you have no idea what I have waiting, in the wings for you.
Right.
And I look now about, looking back is so easy because it's like, oh yeah, that happened. And you kind of take it for granted. And it's just like, now that I look back on some of the things that have happened, I'm like, not only were they unexpected, they were insane that happened at that particular time. And you kind of chalk it up to coincidence at the time.
I don't.
But then you look
I
back.
don't anymore.
I can't anymore because it's just like, oh, of course that would happen. And I almost like laugh sometimes because you'll tell me you're praying for something and then it happens. And I'm like, of course that would, of course I was waiting for this to happen. And, I feel like when you're living a life and praying for things, I think you have to be expecting the unexpected and you have to be waiting for that and ready because it's going to happen because it's called unexpected. You're not going to know when it's happening, but you do have to be prepared for the unexpected because those are the biggest moments that, changed all of our lives and the trajectory, like you were talking about earlier, that completely changed the way that our life went. I don't know where I'd be now though if I didn't go through those tough times and we didn't get married, we didn't meet and didn't have children. I would probably be still playing Golden Tee at Doghouse, with my friends, and I'm so thankful that is not where my life went, and not that there's anything wrong with anybody listening that's down at Doghouse playing Golden Tee right now. It's a great game.
I don't think my demographic
like to
is
enjoy
there.
it. I don't think they're
They're there.
It's an amazing thing though to look at where God's taken us and what He's brought us out of. And
Well, and thinking too about what if that hadn't happened? Like,
yeah, we probably wouldn't be together.
We talk all the time about what if we hadn't had Asher.
Yeah,
And
we might not be together, honestly.
Honestly, and I've told you this. I think there was a lot of me that would have gotten cold feet about marrying into this industry, and
It's
I
a
think
lot.
that God was like, "Too bad,
Yeah,
you got a baby.
yeah.
You're
Here
doing
you go.
it.
We're doing
and it
it.
was just kind of like locking it in. And so I just think, unexpected. It was God given. He gave me that, and I saw how universal it was. I saw how timeless it was, and I just see so much hope in it.
Yeah,
Because I want people to be able to look at their lives and look at those moments as a point of God changed the trajectory.
yeah. I mean, the most
and
unexpected thing
instead
ever is that
of-
you have a podcast.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
that's
I'm like the most introverted, quiet person ever. And I remember, I came to you and I was like, Dad, gummit. God has given me this.
You were
And
furious
I wasn't furious. I was just overwhelmed because I was like, that's just not, I was like, you're the one that's supposed to be
Yeah.
a voice. Ooh, and I can't wait to tell that story later about
Yeah.
how God told me something about a voice too. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
That's-
I kind of want to tie this up with that final thought of just, I hope that whoever's listening is able to view their own story
Yeah.
as God working in those unexpected places and not, oh, my life didn't go the way I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
And instead viewing it as my life totally became something unexpected. How did God use that? Or where was God in that? Because that's His business, is working all things to the good.
Yeah.
And so He will be in it. And I think sometimes the fact that you and I have the privilege of seeing, some of the awesome stuff that God has worked out for us, that's just icing on the cake. Because I think sometimes people go to heaven and their grandchildren will be the ones that see the fruit of it, or, the effects of that decision. We don't always get to see the end result, but I think a lot of times God likes to give us a glimpse into why He did the thing that He did, or how He's turning the thing that He's turning. Because God doesn't always do the bad things.
The bad things that He turns for good are almost never, probably never things that God has placed you in. It's
And maybe it was because maybe He was trying to get you to that rock bottom place.
definitely, it was sometimes, but I think that is the beauty of grace and how the Lord works, is most of the time it's us doing something stupid to get us in that place.
Yep.
As far as our decisions and things, but that's the beauty of what God can do. And I think that it's probably Psalms 91, I would assume, talking about when you're in the depths, I am there, and on the top of the mountain, I'm still there. And I think about that scripture a lot because kind of the analogy earlier of talking about where I find my joy and where I find my peace. I always thought about a mountaintop and thinking of it as far as my career goes, of where we were at on that mountaintop. And then finally realizing that I had the joy with me the whole time. Going to the top of the mountain is icing on the cake. That's great. But wherever I am, it's like, looking around and being like, well, who's with you on the mountain? And knowing that that is the important part of it. It doesn't matter where you're at on the mountain. And finding your joy and your peace in that moment and who you're with and like the life that you're living. And it's an amazing thing because I look back on that scripture and I'm like, that's kind of a hidden message in there of like, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter if you're in the depths. God is still there in those moments, just like he is on the mountaintop. And I always think about, yes, God is there in the depths with us, but his perspective is like all we can see when we're in the valley is the valley. We can't see anything. And we're just like, this is the worst part of my life. I'm depressed. I'm angry and I don't know where I'm going. And God the whole time, he's all knowing. He sees everything. And he's like, if you could, because when you look back on your life and you're looking at the low points, it's pretty easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, that sucked pretty bad back there, But when you're back in a good place, you're like, oh yeah, it's fine. And God the whole time is like, it's going to be fine. Even though you can't see around you and you're in this really depressed valley that you're in, just know that God is with you in that time. And not only is he there, but he knows where you're going to be and where he wants to take you. And that's why just finding those moments. And I've heard somebody, I think it might have been Tom Hanks, say this in an interview recently of what he wishes someone would have told him early on in his career. And I just thought it was so great. It has nothing to do with the Bible or anything, but it's a great quote. It can be applied. And he said, I wish someone would have told me that this too shall pass. And it's obviously, that's an old, probably Lord of the Rings reference. I'm pretty sure it's in that movie. And maybe that's you shall not pass. I don't know.
No, baby, I think that's the
Bible. It is the Bible. But talking about those moments of, all right, this is a really hard thing that you're going through right now, but this too shall pass. You're in a high, you just won a Grammy, you're up there in the clouds, that too shall pass. And I feel like finding that just the even joy in just the everyday, sometimes in your head, mundane things, but the joy in being with your family and having these little moments and little wins. It's not about the highs and it's not about the lows. It's just about finding that peace and that joy and knowing that if you're feeling like hot stuff, then you're not going to be that forever, and that it helps you kind of stay humble in those moments. But I think for young people that are moving to town and listening to this podcast, whether it doesn't have to be moving to Nashville, but you're doing something scary for the first time, you have to go into it, head first and know that any struggles that you may run into, that too shall pass. And you have to just keep your head down and know that God's got it.
But can I point out too that probably the centerpiece to all of it is that foundation that we have? Because I think that there are probably a lot of people in the secular world that recognize that it is about, quote unquote, the journey.
Yeah.
But that peace and that profound purpose and feeling known is in that relationship with Christ.
100%.
And knowing through all of it that we are God's child.
Yeah.
And that he has put us here with purpose and that he has gifted us with different things, that he has made us each uniquely and fearfully and wonderfully.
Yeah.
And, this life is just a drop in the bucket of eternity. And what we do with our time here,
it matters.
It matters.
Yeah.
It matters because it's not just about making it to the mountaintop and it's not just about getting through it when we're in the valley.
Yeah.
But it's about pointing people to Christ wherever we are in that spectrum.
Yeah. About that peace, because you don't get the highs and the lows are one thing and finding joy in that. I think anyone can find some joy by meditating, whatever they do.
Well,
that's not necessarily.
I don't call that joy. I think joy is a fruit of the Spirit.
A little bit happiness, finding what they think is a pretty empty happiness on the surface, but you will never have true peace, in my opinion, without Jesus.
Yeah.
Because I've tried a lot of other things, and it's, that's definitely the main thing that one should take from this very jumbled interview that it's the only thing that got us through. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
If we
in
hadn't
those
had
tough
that,
times.
if we had not had our foundation,
Yeah.
we wouldn't, I mean, I can say that with confidence. It wouldn't have been good.
Yeah, we wouldn't know where to turn in those moments.
And I think that one of the greatest gifts in, having children too is in seeing how God loves us.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even fathom. Like, as much as I love our babies, God loves each of us like that.
Yeah.
And so, what a gift.
What a gift. 2 of them.
2 of them. Baby, thank you for coming on today.
Well, you're
and
very
for
welcome.
being honest and vulnerable. And I love it when you cry. That's part of the reason I
Now we'll cut all
married
that
you,
out.
because we won't cut it out. It is heart.
No,
And-
but I'm very proud of you,
Well, thank
for
you.
stepping out of your comfort zone and doing this podcast. And it's a pretty amazing thing. And I'm just a very proud husband.
Well,
and I
thank you.
love to,
part of
and I
the
love hearing
reason-
your voice. You got a good voice.
Well, thank you. Part of the reason that I get to do it is because you are such a supporter and always have been of anything that I want to do. And so I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for you in general. I'm thankful for the valleys that we've been through. I'm thankful for the mountains that we will get to and the in-between. And I just pray that from this conversation, people hear and know that the centerpiece is Christ in us, and the foundations in Christ that our parents laid for us so that we can lay them for our babies. And that hopefully whoever meets us along the way, I know it's one of my greatest joys when we run into people who have known us from, the time that we started dating, and they'll say, I want a marriage like yours.
yeah. And we're like,
And we're like, whoo, that is,
Careful what you
don't
wish
know
for
what you're
there,
asking
buddy.
for. But to know that people are watching.
Yeah.
And to know that, and again, this is a reason I like to have this podcast, and I like to bring light to things, because people see us on Instagram and it is the highlight reel.
mm-hmm.
And I like to be able to pull back that curtain and say, whew, like, we have gone through a lot to get to where we are.
Yeah.
And wouldn't have made it through any of it without Christ.
Yeah.
And so I hope that any of those listening today have found encouragement in that. I hope that they have found encouragement in the season that they're in. If they are new to town, if they are in that muddled place of graduating high school or graduating college and looking for the thing, I really do encourage you to listen to what God is asking and following His Spirit and following that next step, as unexpected as it may be, because in that obedience, there will be blessing.
Mm.
And I just really, really hope that anyone listening today has found that hope and found that encouragement. And if nothing else, that they can look at the unexpected in their life and say, I guess I see how God worked there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you've made it this far in the podcast, good on you.
Good on you.
This is our 2-day series. It's a 24-hour
I know, we
podcast.
might have to break this up into 2. No,
This is going to be a 6-episode series.
I'm thankful for you.
I'm thankful
And
for you, baby.
I love you so much. I'm thankful that Jesus has seen us through a lot, and He's going to see us through a lot more. So
That's right. We hope you enjoyed this.
This is a Moon Song production.
Moon
No,
Song production.
I'm just kidding.
No, I love you, and thank you for having me on. And hopefully you guys had some fun with us. I feel like we had a therapy session right in the middle of that.
I know that was
Felt really great to cry with you. I'm okay with it. I'm okay as a man.
I should have brought
to cry
tissue.
with my
I
wife.
should have known to brought tissues.
Yeah, no one can see this, but when I started tearing up, Hannah hands me a tissue paper about the size of a quarter.
Well, it's because I had already blown my nose on the other half, and I didn't want to give you any smelly
That's
tissues.
all right.
So,
There we go.
I love you.
I love you.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Unexpected.
Thank you so much for listening today. If this episode has encouraged you, please feel free to share it with your family and friends. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, and my hope is that this show is a candle in the dark.